Oh, my. All right. We're going to wake this up for the preachers who need some help with their preaching. To God be the glory. What's up, y'all? I'm DK Hammonds, digital theologian, rich in technology and theology. Bringing it right to you. Strong, live, and direct. Y'all thought I was going to do one episode. I'm going to do two today. And man, oh man, I got a giant for y'all. She not a heathen like me, so y'all need y'all to be respectful in the comments, please. Because I will hurt your feelings. We're going to bring it right on, y'all. I will. All right. Let me see. I think I need to read your bio. You're a bio-worthy person. Let me get Baptist. She's licensed to preach. She's credentialed, degreed. Man, that's all the bio I'm going to read. If y'all want to read some more bio, please go to her website. And I'm going to let her tell y'all about that in just a second. We're going to get to it. All right. For the saints and ain'ts, I got a real one, y'all. She in the background. I got you on the camera now. She in the background laughing at me because I'm a straight. I need help. There's other people that need help in the area of preaching and leading and teaching. And so what better way to bring in the month of March, which is Women's History Month, and bring in one of who I think is one of the leading voices in the space of preaching and teaching. Now she's gonna, I'm gonna throw it on. I feel like one of the leading voices, one of the voices that is emerging, one of the voices that you guys need to hear about, that you probably have not heard. Now I'm gonna let her introduce herself. How you doing, woman of God?
I'm well. How are you?
Please introduce yourself to the people so they'll know who you are and all that kind of stuff.
All right. I'm Reverend Janice Williams. I am the interim executive minister at Watson Grove Baptist Church here in Nashville, under the leadership of John R. Faison Sr., Reverend Dr. John R. Faison Sr. And I am a fourth-year PhD candidate at Vanderbilt University, and I study homiletics and liturgics, specifically focusing on African-American preaching traditions and the ethics of preaching. I am a Cleveland, Ohio native, reared at Temple Baptist Church by Reverend Dr. Cedric Ville Sr.
What?
And yeah,
okay. I love that. Let's go.
I'm an old soul, and I'm a chill kind of girl. So I mean, I don't know what all.
I think there's one more thing I'm waiting on.
I recently released a workbook entitled Sermon Development Workbook for Preachers, which walks you through the process of sermon development from idea to outline. And I'm super excited about what I've been able to experience and to come alongside a lot of folks and be able to journey with them in their sermon development process.
Yep, now she want to be professional, so let me take it this way. There's one more thing she didn't mention, and that she's a proud member.
Member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
I just wanted to wake up for the fam. That's all. I just want to wake it up for the fam.
Proud. Oh, that's all you had to say that. That's all you had to say.
Yeah, just wake it up for the fam. That's all. Janae, you want me to say? I want to say Janae. It's Janiece. Janice.
Yes.
Janice.
I also answer to Jay. I answer.
Jay works. Okay. I want to make sure I say your name correctly. I do not want the proud members, the silver foxes and stars to come attacking me in my comments. I want to make sure I'm respectful.
My got my back.
And they will come for me. Please understand. They will come for my neck at any moment, at any time, and they will gladly let me know when I have jumped out of order, because occasionally I will. But nonetheless, thank you for coming on to my show, Drop the Mic podcast, as well as Social Media Church. And one of the things that I've always been passionate about in digital discipleship is how we approach the Bible and then how we are preaching that digitally. You could probably go through a myriad of people that are getting it wrong. So what would be some areas that we could start to just simply get it right, in your opinion?
Specifically regarding preaching
Preaching.
or
Yeah, whatever way
pre-
you want to start. We can ride with it.
okay. Some areas that we getting it wrong. I think, really our analysis of culture, I think is an area where we could be better to return to our African American heritage in particular, and to be concerned about and aware of what's going on in the world of the people that we are ministering to. And I will also say that there's also been a move kind of away from this sort of faithfulness to the text, and being able to marry that with the kind of imagination that our 21st century culture demands of us. And I think that, the Bible still preaches itself. I mean, you can literally, there's so many times where you could just hear a preacher just quote a scripture and it does something to you. The Bible preaches itself. And I think in our haste to be innovative, and in our haste to be, the only one out here doing something, we've kind of, I won't say we, that's a broad sweeping generalization, but what I will say is there are many folks who have moved away from being faithful to the text, and really doing the necessary critical exegesis that is required to be able to be faithful to the text and to be able to speak to whatever the needs of our listeners are.
All right. It's about to go up. All right. Let me stretch a little bit. Now, if you guys are just coming on, you're just listening, and I see it didn't go post to my other place, so I'm going to post it later there, and that's fine. She said a whole lot that we have to work on. And our approach, our commitment to biblical exegesis, exegeting culture, if you will, without the limelights turning on you and you turning on the Bible. I think I just summed that up in 2 sentences or less for those who are just a little bit slower than others who can probably capture that. I think it's important, the work that you're doing and how you're trying to help us elevate our game as it relates to preaching. Now, if you don't know, she has recently dropped a workbook that talks about sermon preparation, right? So tell us about your work. Tell us what got you here to write something like this.
Yeah, so I have always enjoyed developing Christian education based resources. So I'm a creative, so I like to create different things. And I'm specifically, and have for a very long time been, a digital creative, meaning I have over a long period of time created various digital products, websites, graphics. I don't do that stuff no more. So that's I just need to make sure I put that out there. I don't do that stuff no more. I don't do those particular things no more. But
Sure.
I've for a very long time, I've created online courses. I've
Yeah.
built out online church communities. It's so many different things. One of the things that I've always loved to do was to create tangible resources to kind of help guide people along the journey of education. And the workbook that is out now is really a like third or fourth iteration of work that I've been doing for years. So
Mm.
back in maybe 2006, 17, I was in seminary. So maybe about in 2018, I released what I was calling the Preacher Journal. And the
Yeah.
Preacher Journal, I found out that Amazon will let you publish, stuff. So I was like, oh cool, let me see what I can create here. And I actually created the very first iteration of that workbook, and it was the same concept, guiding you through a process of exegesis.
Yes.
And a good number of folks were very interested in it, purchased it. And that was just a gift to be able to bring together my love for preaching and preaching methodologies with my identity as a digital creator. And so that's really kind of like the roots of it. Over time, as I've continued to grow as a preacher, and that process never ends.
Yes.
As I've grown as a preacher, but especially once I got into my PhD program, like I legit I'm just now on the other side of my comprehensive exam, so I've read a lot about different preaching methodologies and different ways of approaching exegesis and hermeneutics, and all the things that we know and understand about preaching. And in my mind, I'm always thinking, what are ways for us to translate this into like accessible language? Like, how do we make this more readily available and easier for the everyday preacher who may or may not have access to the kind of resources that seminary education offers? Now, I'm a big proponent of seminary education. If you are
Absolutely.
able, go. Okay. If you are able, I also recognize the financial implications of that. So literally, if you are able, go.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of other resources out there, right? And sometimes the language may not be as accessible, or folks just don't know about certain resources, right? So
Absolutely.
how do we put in the hands of preachers, especially folks who might not be pastoring or are just now getting introduced to it, or are pastoring but just kind of need a new approach? Like, how do we just translate this in a way that's tangible and easy to follow and easy to understand? And accessibility is something that's super important to me as an educator. And so really how the workbook came about, I was never intending to sell it. Like, I actually created it last year, like midway through last year. And it was supposed to be a supplement to my coaching program. 2 years ago, I received a certificate from Vanderbilt University in homiletic coaching. So I'm a certified homiletic coach from one of the top homiletics programs in the world. And I was thinking that I would provide a resource for my clients to be able to journey alongside of them as we're going through our coaching process.
Sure.
And literally earlier this year, I posted a little boomerang in my story of the Sermon Development Workbook. And like, people were inboxing me like, yo, how do I get that? And I was like, what? Like y'all, what? Like, y'all want this? And literally 2 people purchased it that night. And I was like, well, I wasn't expecting that. Like, and so the next day I was like, well, I wonder what would happen if I just posted it on social media. Legit. Those kind of things frighten me. Let me just say that. Those kind of things frighten me because I'm 30, right? And so I believe I would still be considered a young preacher. And so, in spite of the fact that I am getting a PhD from one of the top universities in one of the top homiletics
Hold on,
programs in the country.
let me turn my sound effects up. There we go. Just to make sure I clear the room
I
out.
named that because I named that because it's important, right?
Yeah,
because
it is.
although that is a reality in my life, I am very also aware of the arrogance that many young preachers carry and like to suggest or pretend or front as if they've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
And so the idea of being perceived in that way has always frightened me. So even though I produced the workbook almost a year ago, I was afraid to share it with anyone beyond my coaching practice. I was even afraid to share that I was a coach because I'm like, who am I, young preacher, And my mentors literally had to remind me, like, you're getting a PhD in homiletics, like the highest degree in the land, friend, from one of the top universities in the field. And so, although I was afraid, I said, after the 2 people purchased the workbook, I said, well, let me just see what happens.
Yeah.
And I put it out there, and the rest is history, is what I'll say. And God has been super kind, unfairly kind. It's unfair to God to be this kind to me. And it's just been a great opportunity to be able to see how God will use these years of education and rigorous study to be able to help folks in the kingdom.
Okay.
I know that was a lot.
No. No. It's great. Now look, barring age, I want to talk about what triggered you to just do it. I think that's a moment I don't want to miss. And I think there's a young preacher that may be listening that God is kind of pushing them, not necessarily start a church, but to do something major. Mm-hmm. What triggered you to just do it? It has to be beyond just 2 sales. Like that's one conversation, right? But what triggers you to say, you know what? I'm just gonna push ahead and see what happens. Walk me through that.
Yeah, fear. Or pushing through fear.
Yeah.
Because I remember the moments leading up to me actually posting it and like literally being like, I don't want people to like think I'm X, Y, and Z and yada yada yada. All year, God has been pointing me to Luke 5, where Jesus instructs Peter and them to launch out into the deep for a catch.
Yeah.
Now, I was not anticipating the kind of response that the workbook has gotten, but just to be able to say, to walk in confidence in the gifts and the opportunities that God has given to me, it is a gift to be able to study homiletics at the PhD level, right? It is a gift to be able to conceptualize resources to help people to be faithful to their own calls to ministry, right? And so to be able to walk in confidence that this is what God has called me to, I have to honor God by doing it, right? Like using the gifts that God has given to me. The workbook is a gift to me too, right? And so like I use it. Like I don't just sell, like I actually use it to develop my own sermons. And so to just trusting God with whatever the results are. Just, if God told me to do it, and I don't know that God told me to post it on Facebook. What I do know is that God told me to launch out into the deep for a catch, and I launched in spite of fear. Like I literally was panicking as I was getting ready to post it, and here we are, right? Like just even through pushing through the panic, pushing through the fear to do whatever it is that I'm afraid to do, pushing through the fear to walk on water. You just got to push. Like, I mean, I don't know that you like throw the fear away. I know that you do it in spite of, alongside of the fear.
Now, that's good. I just been taking some notes. The other thing I think is super important to your work. The workbook is just a byproduct of faithfulness and obedience to what God is saying. At least that's what I hear. And so God said, do it, you moved. And so there's somebody under the sound of my voice, God is telling you to do it. And you have not put action to paper or whatever the case may be. And so take what she just said. Take what Lady J just said. I shouldn't say Lady J because, take what J just said and apply it to your life, that you have something of this magnitude that's on the inside of you. And you're able to produce it if you'll just press past these common feelings that you have. And I think that's super dope. I can't say enough about that. That right there is gold, because somebody may want to go to seminary. Somebody may want to lead a small group Bible study. Somebody may want to put out a digital product and have no idea how to do it. Well, she just told you how to start. And most of our issue when we're talking about leading, teaching, and releasing things that God has for us simply is captured in the starting mechanism. If we would start the lawnmower, we could cut the grass. If we start the car, we can move to our destination. If we would start school, we could finish school, et cetera, et cetera. It's all rooted, centered around the focus on start. So the question then becomes, how is our start in this season? How are we preparing just to be catapulted to the next place? Are we even preparing for that? Does that even make sense to us? Because in a digital space, it's a lot of this behind the scenes that people don't see. It's a lot of talk, self-talk, like you just like, oh man, I don't know nobody gonna buy it. You're just going through all of these realm of emotions. And then God says, release it. So let me give you an example for me in this space. As a person that's a CEO of a podcast company, as a person that's a CEO of my own brand company, as a person who works for a church full time, in the two spaces of my brand company and being a CEO of a podcast company, starting, it was so important, but simply releasing it out was the next thing. Every time it's not going to be perfect. Sometimes you just got to do it. And you got to put it out there so you can at least learn what failure looks like, or learn what mistakes to fix, or learn what things to create and move from. So that's my response to that. Go ahead. What you say?
Yeah, and I also say to understand and to remember that these things don't happen overnight, right? Like I said, like what the workbook we're talking about now is the grandchild of previous works when I was less prepared, when I was less knowledgeable in my field, when I was, had less tools and resources readily available to me. This today is years in the making,
Come on.
right? And so it's also understanding that sometimes you will start and stop and start and stop and rework and go back to the drawing board and be okay with, and I wouldn't even necessarily call it failure. It's trying, it's refining, it's
Mm,
growing, it's learning, it's letting God retool you time and time again. And a part of that is doing all the other pieces that are attached to it, right? So if God told you to go to school, you don't know what that going to school is going to do to aid the dream that God's deposited in you. I'm in school for a PhD and I never thought that I would develop this resource, but being in school is aiding me and
mm,
giving me the tools and the knowledge, the resources that I need, and even the relationships that I need to be able to refine my knowledge base, to do the work that I'm able to do today. So it's a balance of understanding that these things don't happen overnight. Sometimes you're going to start and stop, and part of the start and stop is continuing to follow God in the other areas because you don't know how they're going to pour into
yeah.
and co-construct the thing that you're dreaming of. It's okay if it don't work out the first time or
Mm,
the second time or the third time or the fourth time, but if it's a promise or an idea or a something that God has called you, know God has called you to that thing. Maybe it's about timing. Maybe it's about tooling. Maybe like you don't know what timeline God has purpose for the dream. Every dream ought not be released today. Some dreams need to stay in the oven. So the better meal is the meal that's been cooked in the oven as opposed to the microwave, right? Like we hear that all the time. Like
no doubt.
some of your dreams need to be in the oven. And we know when we cooking food in the oven, sometimes you got to open up the oven, you got to test it out and see, is it all the way cooked through? Some things need to be turned over. Like it's a process. It's a process.
One of the things that I wrote down, this is rich. If y'all just catching this, I'm DK Hammonds, the digital theologian. I'm with Janice Williams, who her credentials speak for themselves. Go look them up. I ain't got time to be telling y'all about who she is. She my sister in the faith, and that's all that matters to me today. And we just want to lift up her work. And I'm really at this space where I'm honoring people who I don't see get the proper respect and due with my platform. I have an opportunity to kind of stretch out in multiple spaces. And I want to make sure, like I just interviewed Brother Rollins, who used to do sermon clips back in the day.
Yeah.
Like
Still watching those videos on YouTube, okay?
still watching Brother Rollins. Like, and I had to explain to him how much he meant to our culture.
Yeah.
I don't think like it should be studied how much he meant to us, because some of us didn't know about E. Dewey Smith,
Right.
Reginald Sharp,
Right.
Jerry Black. I knew about
The
him.
women preachers.
The women preachers. Thank you.
Which is important because for
Yes.
those of us who didn't grow up around women preachers,
Yes.
our introduction to many of them came from that platform.
Come on. Hold on. Let me give you some lane. She about to dunk the ball. Here, sis. Get the lane. You get your lane. I'm gonna get.
I'm
off
just
the
saying
screen.
these things. This is a part of the gift of digital discipleship, right? This is the gift of what social media has given to especially marginalized communities,
Yes.
right? Like I said, I wasn't really around women preachers, but
Yes.
because of the work he did, I was able to be introduced and formed by the ministry of women preachers from afar.
All right. 30 years old and she has this type of brilliance.
Oh Lord.
This is amazing. Like, if you know about yeah. And the women. And I can think of women that even that platform has exposed me to that I had no idea preach the gospel.
Yeah.
And I'll share this here. I grew up Baptist, and I was old school where women didn't have the lane to speak like they can or like they're forging towards now. And so I had to do a lot of fighting and deconstructing that. And I'll openly admit that, to the point where a friend of mine, I'll say her name is Dwaylunda Alexander. She lives here in Fort Worth, and she took me to the woodshed. and broke me off. I was like, dude, I've been missing this the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, missing the fact that we are co-laborers in the gospel. And so we should approach it that way. And so I vowed from that day forward. I was like, nah, we ain't living that way. We're living the way God has intended. And what was funny is now I'm married to a preacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't, if I didn't have that lesson, and some preacher I'm talking to, you need that lesson. You need that lesson to say, hey, player, they can do everything you can do. Get out the way, let them, and you'll see what God can really bless you with by making and empowering and making things as inclusive as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that was my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have, and so from that day forward, I have been platforming women everywhere I go, in particular African-American women who need opportunity and placement, because I refuse to walk into a room and they're not in there with me. If they're not in there, I'm walking right out, because y'all y'all don't have what I would like to say. Y'all don't have the smart people at the table. I only sit where the smart people are located. I'm going to sit with them and then I'll come back to y'all. So we talked about digital discipleship. I wrote a book about early last year about the seven steps of digital discipleship, and really delving into that for people who are not aware of this term. So you've been around the business, you've been around the game. When you hear that, how does that show up in the regular local church context to you?
That's a hard question to answer, because I think every church is contextual. Like every
Absolutely.
church has its own identity. So it looks different in a lot of different churches. And like it looks different in a rural church than it would in a mega church. It looks different in a mid-sized church than it would even in a mega church, right? Like, so it looks different in different areas. What I will say is that churches who have digital discipleship or engage in some kind of digital discipleship processes and communities just understand that there are many ways to disseminate information, to form community, to provide opportunities for our parishioners to be able to develop and connect. The great thing is that technology has given us the opportunity to be able to connect with people and to journey alongside of people and to build relationships with people in ways that we've never seen before. We were at my church prior to my current position. I served as our minister of digital witness and connection.
Yep.
And so in that position, I was able to, we as a church was able to go do an entire ministers and training process, and we used digital tools in that process. We created online courses for them to be able to engage the material asynchronously, so that by the time we came together, it was more conversational than just lecture, just in-person lecture, right? We were able to license someone who lives in Washington, D.C., who travels back and forth here to worship with us every couple months, right? Like, she just came here about a week ago to worship, and she went through her process completely online, preached her initial sermon completely online.
That's
and
perfect.
so so that's a gift. It also gives us the opportunity to be able to create multiple touches with the message on Sunday. So this primary, Christian education resource in the preaching moment, right? Like that is a Christian education resource. Before, it was just, you got to go here. You have to go to the church to hear the sermon. Now, you can identify moments in that sermon that really speak to whatever is necessary for people in the communities, our listening communities, to be able to hear. You can clip that in a 1 minute, reel, TikTok, YouTube short, whatever, whatever format, and be able to just push it out there. And in 1 minute, parishioners and non-parishioners are able to be encouraged, inspired, challenged, stretched, all the things in a 1 minute clip. So, beyond the views, this allows us to make a pew of wherever our people are, right? Like, I'm on the train able to be inspired in a minute. I am convicted by a 1 minute message that I see on my Instagram feed. Like,
Yeah.
and I think, and those things challenge people to be able to be more like Christ.
Yes.
And so I think that is a gift. So I can't say what it looks like in every context, but what I will say is these are the gifts that they've rendered to us.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Every context in every church, in every space is going to be different. Thus, what they do on this side is not what you're going to do. But there is some learning that we can all shadow from. And I think that's the most important part as far as like the inspection of the fruit. How can we learn to produce that type, that color, that size of fruit so that we can do this potentially over here or curtail it in a way that it helps our people over here. And so I think that's what I've learned for the last 2 years being in a multi, if you want to call it ethnic space, is taking, okay, wait a minute. We do this over here in the African American church. I know this works. Can we apply this same thing here? And most of the time it can be applied, but it has to have certain context, as you just mentioned, for the said space. And so that's, to your point, now we lift up and say, do we understand our context? In the digital world, as well as our regular church context, do we understand it in a way that it could be lined up, it could be shared, it could be used in another city, a person can, receive a licensing for ministry? Bananas. Do we understand it in that way? Because most of us do not. And so that was super helpful. Listen, 30 minutes. I told you we don't have to go long and strong. We just need to get out there. What do you want people to know when they leave this conversation?
I want folks to know that our preaching practice is a lifelong journey, right? You could be the best preacher in the world today and still have a lot more growing to do. Like, the world is constantly changing. And if the history of preaching has taught us anything, it's that our preaching has to rise to the cultural occasion. Preaching has always been, every form of preaching over the course of the history of preaching, it has always responded to and been shaped by whatever the cultural need is, whatever the social need is.
Correct.
And so if culture has historically always shaped the homiletical product, then it's our responsibility to be always growing and always seeking to develop as preachers, as teachers of the gospel, because the world is constantly and rapidly changing. And because we all know that the church has always been a few steps behind the wider culture, we know we got a lot of catching up to do, right? And so, like, my encouragement is to always be hungry to learn more, always be hungry to be quiet and listen. Listen to our sages who have gone before us and are going before us. And no matter how old you are, right? Because you can be 40 and still need to listen to the sages. You can be 60 and still need to listen to the sages who are 80. You can be 60 and still need to listen to what a 30-year-old has to say, right? Like, this process of learning is communal, it is multi-generational, and it is lifelong. And so that's what I would want people to take away from this conversation.
Rich conversation. Tell people where they can pick up your book, as well as how they can connect with you on social media.
Okay, so let's start with social media. You can hit me up on social media at JRenee I Am. So JAYRENEE I Am. That's my Instagram handle. I'm on Facebook, Janice Renee. And JaniceRenee.com is where you can purchase the workbook. Now let me help the saints here, because the folks spell my name wrong all the time. Okay. You know how you have like a nephew and a niece, right? You got a nephew and a niece, right? It's my name is literally spelled Janiece, Niece. Okay. I have to help folks because they write Janice and they don't autocorrect. They don't do any. So I gotta help folks understand how to spell my name. It's Janiece. So if you forget anything, just think how you got a nephew and you got a niece, spelled the same way. Janiece. Renee.com. I wanna help the saints.
Help the saints for real. I've interviewed a lot of preachers. This is probably one of my favorite ones. And you remind me so much that energy. Breonna Parker has a similar energy.
Mm-hmm.
And just that, I was like, is this? No, this for sure. And because it's Breonna Parker. Salute to Breonna Parker. That's my home.
Yeah, she's great.
And she's also in the same space that we're all in, and trying to really disciple people and evangelize people in a very technological way. And so
Yeah.
I want to honor you and thank you for your work. And I think one of the ways to do that is, number one, I want to, if somebody's listening, I want to buy them a book. So me and you will talk offline. We'll get that handled. It won't even be a conversation. If you listening and you go and give her a recap in her notes, don't send it to me. Send it to
Oh, you can send the volume to me.
Hey, you want the book?
That's all right. That's all right.
Here's how we gonna do it. Y'all gonna follow on all social media handles. Number one, you're gonna send her a recap. And if you've done that, she'll give you a book. No questions asked. And I'll make sure that book is covered. That's for a person. You got to listen to the end to get this. This is an end. See, you see how we did that? This is a call to action.
You got to do it.
You got to listen to the end to get this. And if you listen to the end, you get you a free book. Send it right to you, no questions asked. But you got to follow on all the platforms she just mentioned. You got to make sure you spell her name right. She said that too.
That's right.
That's facts. You got to make sure you do that. And you got to send her a recap. If you do those things, one of them, so we'll get you taken care of. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for all of our sponsorship partners who may be partnering with us. We appreciate you so much. Your donations, your love allows us to spread the gospel even further than what we're able to do. So this your boy DK Hammonds. We love y'all. We thank y'all. We appreciate y'all. Y'all make sure y'all send her a love offer for having to deal with me for so long. Jeez Louise, what a heathen. All right, y'all. Peace.